Hello and welcome to Hop Along Studio. So today we're talking about how to use pan pastels in our card projects. And pan pastels may not be the first medium you think about when you're thinking about cards. Part of it is they can be challenging to seal. They blend beautifully, you get great results from them, but they can be a little bit challenging to make sure that they stay on the card and not on your hands. Today we're going to be talking about a few different ways you can use these pan pastels and how you can seal them properly to get great results. I am using a pastel paper today. I'm using 400 Strathmore pastel paper for this project. And I'm just adding a piece of tape on the back just to hold this in place. The biggest thing when you're working with pan pastels with stencils is that you want to make sure that you don't have your piece of paper move and you don't have your stencil move. So I'm just going to add a little bit of tape here. That's going to hold the stencil down onto my surface just so it doesn't raise while I'm working. So I'm using a variety of my favorite pan pastels today and a blending tool. The blending tool I'm choosing to use today is a disposable makeup applicator. You can also use soft tools. Soft tools are quite a bit more expensive. The makeup applicators are quite inexpensive, and then I can just pitch them when I'm done over needing to wash or try to clean up these sponges. And because these do wear over time, I've been finding that just because I'm not as gentle as I should be, especially with the stenciled images, I like using the makeup applicators. And so I'm going to be using the least expensive option today as we're applying these pan pastels. And if you haven't seen my other pan pastel videos, all you want to do is touch your applicator to the surface. That's going to pick up some color. And then you're going to add it in a little bit of circular motion. Because I like the circular motion blend. You can also just blend it straight out to the edges. It's up to you. Really, anything will work for getting the color down onto the surface. You don't need to press really hard for this. It goes on really easily. All you're looking to do is glide over the surface. And these pan pastels will blend beautifully on their own. They do not need a lot of help to get a really nice coverage on your surface. It's going to continue on and just add a little bit of this poinsettia color onto my project. And again, you can just use whatever little motions that you need to get the color in. You can just pull out to the edges. You can do little circular motions. Whatever it takes to really get into those small crevices. Now that you've added your first layer of color, I'm going to go with the slightly darker red, the permanent red shade. I'm just adding a little bit more to the center, going out to the edges. This is a really nice way of just adding a little bit of darker areas and lighter areas so that you have a little bit more shading in there. Because that's the beauty of the pan pastels, is you can get quite a bit of shading and it can be done fairly easily on your page. Compared to watercolor, a lot of my other mediums, especially if you're newer to blending mediums, this one's a really great one to choose. You can get great color down really, really quickly. And I started teaching a pan pastel class this week, actually, both locally and online. I may offer it again in the new year, so if you think you might be interested in this, check out the classes that I have online. I'm more than happy to do custom classes for people, as well as do a little bit more one-on-one instruction depending on what you're looking for. Just help people with their creative practice and help them feel a little bit more confident with what they're doing. And then I'm going to go back in and just do the poinsettia centers, and I'm using just a straight black for this. I just want to do those little centers. I'm okay if it goes over a little bit. Again, it gives that a little bit more sense of dimension, even if you end up with a little bit of black elsewhere. And you definitely have a choice with this. You can go extremely rigid and make sure you just get those center sections, or you can go and add in color out to the petals as well. We're going to move on to the greens. You'll notice your hands will get a little bit messy. That's one thing about the soft tools, is because of the long handle, you end up having a little less on your hands. But I don't mind using these little makeup applicators. And I'm going to start with my lightest color here. This is a bright yellow green color that I'm going to be using. And I'm just adding them, the first layer, onto my leaves here. And I tend to work light dark, especially on the leaves. And even with the poinsettias themselves, that's what I also did. I started with the lightest red, and then I moved to a darker shade, and then I moved to the black. And that's almost a better way of being able to control the color a little bit. And you'll notice that I do have a little bit of the red mixing in with that. That's okay. By the time we finish adding color, you're not going to notice it. And I'm pressing into my color quite a bit. I do want this as vibrant as I can possibly make it. I'm going to grab another part of my sponge and going in with a little bit of a darker green. This is a phthalo green. Phthalo green's always great for mixing, and I'm just adding in a little bit of color over top, especially the ones that got a little bit of red mixed in. This is a really great way of just hiding some of that muddy color, but by having the base of the lighter green, it does add a little bit of interest and variation to these leaves. You can see I'm not covering them up in all the spots, I'm just covering them up in some spots. And then I'm going to go in with my phthalo green extra dark as well, and just adding in a spot here and there. Don't need to add a lot for this to work nicely. Usually the leaves are a little bit darker than what I'm doing here, but I kind of wanted the contrast of color. And you'll notice on my paper below here, it might not be totally obvious, but I have a little bit of bleeding of color. Just use an eraser. Pan pastel will come off with an eraser, so it's a brilliant thing because you don't necessarily have to have your paper perfect. An eraser works really well for just picking up any extra color. And if you have noticed that there's any areas in between that have picked up color that you don't want, use a kneaded eraser. If you've never seen a kneaded eraser, I have these little Faber-Castell kneaded erasers. They come in gray, they can also come in other colors like this. And when you knead them, that basically cleans them. And you can make them into really tiny, small areas that you can pull up color with your eraser. So you can use your eraser just to pick up any color that's been in places you don't really want it to be. Any of the colors bled underneath the stencil. This is a really great way of just cleaning up your image a little bit. I'm going to add in some more images below, and if you're worried that your stencil might take on some color from below, just run your kneaded eraser over top. It's going to pick up any of that extra pastel. So anything that would maybe transfer onto your page is now on your kneaded eraser. And then you just knead it, that cleans it, and you can go in again. So I think everyone should have at least one kneaded eraser. I didn't use them for years because I didn't understand how they worked, but once I did, I realized that they're one of the best tools you can have, just because they can pick up just little bits of color. It picks up all sorts of things that maybe you don't want on your paper, and it prevents you from having any issues with a lot of lines that maybe you don't want. Now I'm gonna go and move this down, and I realized that I should maybe not done those last 2 poinsettias there because now they're really cut off. So what we're gonna do is add other ones to kind of cover up that little air. They're gonna be a little bit overlapping. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna start with my lightest red and add color. So I'm gonna do the same technique as I did earlier. And if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far, if you can just hit that like button, that's a way that you can help other people see this video, and that really helps me out. So thank you so much for your support. So there are two things that I would use for sealing pan pastels. One of them is Spectra Fixative, which is an aerosol fixative, or matte medium. And I'll get into matte medium in a minute, but we'll talk about spray fixative specifically. Krylon does have a workable fixative. I have tried using it on my pan pastels. I find that they get very dark, they get splotchy, and I don't like the results. I find that it dulls my pan pastels to the point where they have about half the color that they started with. My favorite is Spectra Fixative, but I find that I generally have a hard time finding it in the spray bottle that it can come with, so I usually get the concentrate, and the instructions say to mix it with some sort of alcohol. They suggest Everclear and vodka, funny enough, and so I ended up mixing this particular concentrate into a bottle. This one happens to be something I was using for cleaning my glasses. I find that often the spray bottles that you would get makeup products in, or you get glass cleaner in, generally have better pumps than a lot of the ones I can find online. So I generally tend to repurpose these for my projects. And so with this Spectra Fixative, you basically just want to spray a liberal amount on your piece. And you'll notice that it will buckle and it will look a little soft at first. It's going to dry and it's going to spread out again. And then you're going to want to be able to do this 2, 3, 4 times. Sometimes I like to create one layer and then add in the fixative, add another layer, add in the fixative. And that's a way you can build color. And these ones, I'm just showing you basically how to do everything as one layer. But if you want to actually have a little bit more vivid color and you want to have a little bit more variation in those layers, I often like to spray in between. So we're going to let this fully dry before we look at testing it to see how set it is. Second way I like to seal my pan pastels is with matte medium. And what I do is add just a little bit of matte medium to my gel plate surface. Gel plate's a really useful tool. It's really useful using a palette for stamping stamps. It has a lot of different uses that besides gel printing that I love to use it for. And I've added too much onto my surface, but I'm just gonna add in a thin layer here. And again, if it looks too white, just pull that whiteness off to the side. You don't want a super, super thick layer. You just need enough to basically seal in the pan pastel color. So I'm basically adding it on top. I'm pressing it into the matte medium, and this is going to seal the surface. And you need to do it in one step like this. If you used a brush and you brushed it across, you would smear all of your color. The reason this works is because you're pressing it down and lifting it up in one go. And there you go. So you can see that in some areas it's on thicker, some areas it's on thinner. So now that you've added one layer, it's easy enough to go in with a layer of matte medium with a brush, because now you're just looking to even it out. You're not looking to try to seal in that color. So now we've sprayed this once. Question, has it fully sealed? And in my case, I am picking up color, so it isn't fully sealed. So this is where you would go in and add 2 or 3 or 4 layers of medium until it's fully sealed. If you do run into a situation where it isn't fully sealed, and let's say you accidentally do this and you run your finger across it and you end up blending it out. It's not ideal, but I wanted to show you a technique that I purposely used when I did have a blend that didn't work. All I'm doing is taking a makeup sponge and I'm rubbing it. And that's just softening everything. And you're gonna get some weird streaks and you're gonna get some weird marks, but it does soften the background a little bit. I'm now going to go in with a little bit of this pearl medium and I'm adding it on top as well. So if you want, you can just leave it here and it can just be a really soft background, which is also an option. It sealed a bit better than I expected it to. My other card didn't seal as well, but I did want to show you what you can do if you do make mistakes or you want to try to add extra layers to it. So now that's a lot softer than it was. So what you can do now is you can go and seal this again and let it dry. So once it's dry, then you have another choice to make, because honestly, I like this as a really soft background. And if you want to leave it as a really soft background, you can just put a sentiment on top and call it done. But I want to show you how you can add in more layers on top of this. And this is a way of maybe softening layers and then adding new layers and just creating a much more interesting card. In this case, I'm just putting my stencil right into the center, and I'm going to stick with a new sponge because I really want this to be a much lighter, more vibrant color than the color below. So now you just want to go in and go over top. So every time you add a layer of fixative, it just basically seals in that layer. Because what happens is the paper ends up getting so saturated with color that no more sticks to the surface. And so it's just going to sit on top. It's going to hang out there loose. By adding in a layer of fixative that seals in the color, allows you to add more color on top. And unlike a varnish, what this will do is this will let you add layer on layer on layer. You don't have to worry about it being sealed in and you can't add other layers on top. With a varnish, you're basically using that as the final layer. The Spectrafix is basically a fixative, so it allows you to keep working. So you can see that as I'm adding in the color, it's quite a bit more vibrant because I've now softened the background color by mixing it a little bit. And what's nice about this technique is because you've now have a full layer on the background. The hard thing with the white is the white's not very forgiving. I find that a lot of pastel papers, they do come in white, but they also come in a lot of other colors. And I think part of the reason for that is just because of the medium. And also it's nice to end up with a different undertone color on your cards. I'm just going to go again another direction with this. I am pulling in what is called a medium. What this is going to do is it basically doesn't add color, it just adds shine. I don't own a lot of metallics, so instead I have this one medium that I use. And it works really well for just creating a little bit of shine. And it also lightens a little bit, so that's a nice thing when you're trying to maybe have a little bit darker edges on your leaves and a little bit of a lighter center. And I do want to go back to using a tiny bit of that black in those centers. And some of that is just to kind of keep this cohesive. The style that I'm doing it, I did that on the back ones. I want to do that on this one as well. So you can see that creates some darker ones, some lighter ones. It adds a little bit more variation to that color. And I'm going to spray this again. I'm going to spray it a couple times just to set that color in. And that's basically how I ended up with this card. So this card has those layers of the softer in behind and the lighter on top. And because this is sealed a little bit better, I have a little less variation than I do in this one. But I wanted to teach you the technique so you can replicate it yourself. So you can see we have our two backgrounds here. Ways of sealing them gives you two very different looks. The white's always a hard one just because the pan pastel, the little crumbs of color tend to spread. So sometimes it's hard to get a really good image, but that matte medium does make a difference. And with this one, I love the little layers that I've created. These ones are a little less varied as the card that I did before, but I really wanted to show you just the technique because this one here, you have everything from very light layers to very dark layers. And so it's just another way of using your pan pastels. This is a great layering medium. You just need to use a Spectrafix to fix those layers in between, and that makes the biggest difference. And you'll notice that this one has curled quite a bit. If you don't like the curling, what I would suggest is just using a low-tack tape and just add it around the edges before you add in your pan pastels, before you add in your Spectrafix. And then any wet that does get add it on, it's going to end up just easing back on the paper because it is taped down. But with this one, I'm just going to use some adhesive and add it to a card back, and it's going to work just fine. And so you can see that just by adding in a couple little sentiments, adding in a couple little things, you end up with two beautiful cards that are great for Christmas. And really, this could be easily adjusted using any stencil and your pan pastels for any sort of card or even any sort of project during the year. And if you're interested in any of the colors I've used or any of the products I've used, I've included them all below in the description. And if you're looking for another video about pan pastels, click here. This is the very first pan pastel video that I did, and I did include not only how to use pan pastels, but also how to use them with mediums. So I'll see you in that next video.